Very good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to Executive Insights by Mediacorp, marketing through uncertainty with agile strategies and data-driven precision. My name is Jacqui. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Mediacorp, and I'll be your host today. So what we're going to talk about in the next hour is hot on every business owner and marketer's minds. Because no matter which industry we're in, it's hard to find businesses that are not impacted by the wider global environment of trade tariffs, rising costs, disrupted supply chains, and all the overall sense of unpredictability and concerns about the economy. So we're very privileged today to be unpacking this interesting topic with three very accomplished and respected industry leaders who have not only weathered previous storms, but have also flourished through the various challenges over the years, right, as they run their businesses. So to share their perspectives and their know-how in how they remain agile, sharp, and adept in turning market volatility into business opportunities. So allow me to introduce, today we have Ian Loon. He's the CEO, Media and Digital Singapore, and Chief Transformation Officer of Southeast Asia Publicis Group. We have Debra Soon, Group Head of Brand Communications, Marketing and Experience from Singlife. And we have Paul Soon, CEO of MullenLowe, Singapore and China. So I'll kickstart today by directing my first question at Paul. So how have recent economic and geopolitical shifts impacted marketing plans, be it in the way you do budgeting, targeting, planning, or messaging? What kind of shifts and pivots have you personally made and observed in your time?
Thanks a lot, Jacqui, and good morning, everyone. That's a wonderful question. On our end, because we are more of a creative agency that supports our clients and brands, the observation is that when there are signs of economic downturn or headwinds, there's a greater call for agency consolidation. In other words, a greater lens whereby clients are looking to partner agencies that are able to do more for them in a more integrated and organized fashion, because that really helps drive my next point, which is also the shift in operational relevance and in ensuring agility. And more importantly, also, I'm pretty sure, but I'll be the first one to say it, then there's also a drive for adoption of AI today, which also will be seen as a multiplier, but hopefully used in a very, very meaningful way. So these are just three observations that, at least on a service provider standpoint, we react with our brands.
Right, very interesting. I mean, what about Ian? What have you observed personally or maybe activated in terms of changes and pivots?
So firstly, good morning, everyone. I think very similar to Paul, right? I think for the Publicis Group, and the business that we are in, it's always in service of our clients. So I think the reactions and the undertakings have been quite diverse. But I think firstly, the first point perhaps to echo what Paul had said, right? We are seeing a lot of consolidation in terms of the various service lines, right, that we are providing to many of our clients. And I think this is often, for better or for worse, for the agencies on different occasions. Of course, consolidation means that we get to take on more, right, to connect the dots between lateral services, again, whether it's creative, production, media, digital, CRM, commerce. And I think fundamentally, we're all doing that also because of the need for greater, tighter orchestration, right, and agility at the same time. So many clients are moving to that space. And I think beyond just what's happening for us, even when we reflect on our client organizations, right, I think there is also that sort of pressure to ensure that interdivisions, interdepartments, right, are working a lot more seamlessly to exchange a lot more information and intelligence. So I think that's the first point that really reflects how bottom line focus, the bottom line focus adjustments are. But I think for quite a number of our clients, right, I think we also see that there's a shift towards value-based messaging. So I think, it's no longer just about communicating, for example, a specific product launch, right, but trying to shift and create more value so that consumers can feel that they're getting really more bang for their buck, like more bundles, for example, right, that telcos would speak of, specific loyalty points, cashbacks, that sometimes financial services would cover. And actually recently as well, an auto client of ours, right, the automotive sector used to have, test drives where you can only do it for like half an hour when you go to the showroom. But now there's an invitation, right, for test drives for you to actually borrow the car for a couple of days, drive it and get the full experience and the full bang for your time going for that trial, and then deciding after the end of 3 or 4 days whether or not you actually want to purchase the car, right? So there's a lot more value-based messaging again, I think that is coming across for people to stretch their dollar and their time.
Right, right. I mean, I'll pose this question also. Maybe Debra, you could jump in. Based on what the two gentlemen have said, I can hear two very different perspectives, right? One is probably driven by cost savings, wanting to have more synergy, consolidation. But the other, at the other end of the spectrum, we see brands potentially becoming more innovative, not necessarily just coming from a cost perspective, with Ian's example about how auto brands have also tried to be a lot more experiential, thinking from the customer's perspective, how to make that entire brand preference and buying process a little bit more seamless by even extending a half-day test drive to a 3-day experience. So from your perspective, in Singlife, like what were the shifts that you have seen?
Okay, first I'd say that usually media and marketing are the first budgets to get cut, right? All of us know that. We have been in the industry long enough. So we are a barometer of the economy and of global shifts in the economy. So all of us have felt this, hence you need to consolidate. We are constantly trying to do better and get better efficiency. I'm on the client side now, as you guys know. And we also know the other trend where clients are in-housing a lot of things because we think it'll be faster go to market, more efficient. It's a challenge for all of us in the industry, right? We have done that as well. I used to work with, actually, Paul has been a great partner, right? But we in-house some stuff, and I'm sorry, Paul, but I guess that's the reality, right? If you're capable of doing it, you do it, or you hire the capabilities and you think you get better ROI like this. That's what we've done as a brand. How else are we going to be innovative? So besides in-housing, we use a lot more data. We use our own client data because we have data to mine. So you see also a consolidation of marketing functions. The role of the CMO has changed, right? We are now also, I'm also Chief Customer Officer. Experience stands for customer experience, customer, in other words, segmentation, loyalty programs, engagement. Ian talked about car buying and car trends. Today, we have a partnership we have a car brand that's partnering us to do test drives today. We are leveraging that. They are leveraging our client base. We are leveraging their client base, their budget to organize it. We're not paying for it. They're paying for it.
Very interesting,
right?
yes.
So these things are happening, right? It's also a function of the way media and consumption has gone. Social media has gone. We've seen how the entire landscape has fragmented. It's also caused a fragmentation of the touch points for customers. And that is the challenge that I think all of us have to rise up to, right? Rise to, because we are all trying to reach customers and to grow customer share. Okay, Jacqui, you're muted. We've lost you.
Sorry, could you hear me now? Okay, apologies.
Yes.
Everyone. Now, I was saying, building on your point, right, that because all the roles are starting to merge and it's really difficult for us to decouple between, even from if you look at it from a platform standpoint, it's harder to even say which parts are done by a creative agency or a social agency or a client or a production house these days, right? Or an influencer or a creator. The roles have actually started to blur. But do you also see that brands are also taking a bit of a short-term approach, right? So because of cost constraints and everything having to stay within a budget, do more with less, there's always a tendency to just chase down the rabbit hole of lowering our cost per acquisition, our cost per lead, driving results in the immediate term, right? Because there's a lot of business pressures there. Do you see that there will be also risk in how brands are foregoing a lot of brand building efforts, and there might be actually longer term or midterm to longer term payoffs as in impact as a result of this?
I'm sure that CFOs will expect that you continue to cut your brand budget, which literally has happened to some of us. But then what we have to do is to be clever, more clever how we manage our budget. So basically the product and brand budgets have merged. At least in my team, right? I don't know how others will do it. But what it means is you need to align the messaging tighter, right? And that is getting more collaboration within your teams, making sure people's KPIs are aligned, that that the brand targets must align with the product sales targets. And it's really for us in the marketing space, the content creation space, to really think deeper and ideate better. I think there is still a lot of value working with external service providers because you have to. I think an outside-in view is always necessary, right? So
Yeah.
brands, companies and brands still need to do that, right? Maybe they might forego it in the short term, but if you do forego spending on brand in the short term, you know that payback will come.
Right.
All of us have been around long enough to know that the payback will come. You still need to spend on brand. That overall story, you still need that. It might not be brand spending the same way that we've done it. We don't do a big brand, or now we call them brand films, we don't call them TVCs, right? You're a big brand film, you might do digital extensions, you want to target people differently using digital, but some out-of-home media is still, that presence is still required. That, at least that's how I feel.
Right. Maybe for building on Debra's points, I wanted to check with Paul as well, because, when Debra was mentioning about with the same budget, clients are now expecting you to tackle both objectives, right? Short term, long term. Does that translate into struggles for your team when you are trying to digest a brief, and with the same resources, you have to tackle both objectives? And has that been challenging, or have you found some success cases in being able to do that effectively?
I think, Jacqui, I will respond to this in two ways. One is that I think the agency and client relationship has to be built on trust, and trust actually is built through difficult times, not so much the good times. So everybody can do a lot of things during the good times, and that's the best part of it. But the active conversation on how to help each other and support each other through the turbulent moments are the ones that allow us to build what is meaningful. And I think as an agency partner from an external view, our job is still to maintain a sense of where the consumer is and where the opportunities would still sit. Granted that we also know that we need to be faster, we need to be more reactive, we need to also look at how we repackage our costs in order to support the key initiatives that we are running, and to also accept what clients like Debra have had to do. Can we take things internally? What do we need to do to help with that, and how do we reshape everything? But I do want to echo a point, especially to our listeners, that brand building should never ever stop. In fact, actually, research has shown that brand building during turbulent times is actually one of the even more critical, because scientifically we're building memory structures, and I'm pretty sure Ian can lean in, right? From a media perspective, there's also lots of opportunities to reframe what brand building is. And then, of course, you recut some of the activities that are seemingly frivolous or not so important, but then sharpen your areas of activation, especially in Singapore and so on. And we all Singaporean consumers tend to love an emotional connection and a brand with a point of view. So I think during turbulent times like this, it is a wonderful opportunity to do the right thing with your agency partners and as a brand, to really sharpen your message and build for the future instead. I think it's seen as an opportunity that way for us also.
Right. We'd love to hear from Ian. What do you think about this point in terms of how it applies to your area of business?
I think definitely going to double down on some of the points that Debra and Paul had mentioned, right? I think firstly, not investing in brand is bad for business. And I'll be very pointed about this, because penultimately as well, if you don't invest in brand, right, you're not going to have any pricing power, and you're also going to lose customer loyalty, right? But I think this age-old argument between brand and performance budgets, it's not only of recent times. I think I could recall that it started to intensify even 5 years before the pandemic, so like 10 years ago, right? And the reason why, again, is because the trade-offs are often more immediate for you when you invest in performance, to know what outcomes you're actually getting, simply because of the transparency, from or the data that you get from some of the platforms, for example, right, that have made actually performance marketing a lot more appealing. But I would say again that it really has to be quite an intricate balance, because we have seen again clients over investing too much on the lower part of the funnel, and then over time as well diluting margins and driving unsustainable benchmarks as well towards pricing. It's really not going to help, right? And it's a race just to price at the end of the day, and even for the agency resources to optimize till the cows come home, right? So I think there's a lot of challenge in that domain. I think the answer to some of these right now still goes back, to perhaps engaging in market mix modeling studies or ROI analytics. And sometimes when I refer to these points, there are some clients, for example, who take a back seat because like, oh, how much is it going to cost? how much time will it take, right? But the reality is that actually the last couple of years, there has been a lot of very accessible and I would say more dynamic and fast-paced modern techniques, right, to MMM. And in fact, all you need to ensure is that your data, your data is clean and organized, right? You are open about the collaboration with all your agency partners, and internal divisions about why you're doing it. Everyone pulls data together, cleans it up, and then from there, you can ingest the model as well. You can ingest all the data into the model, and you can get outcomes. And this actually gives a lot of marketers, right, probably a language to use in the boardroom, right? Again, to convince CEOs on why marketing shouldn't be the first budget to get cut. So I think maybe that's something that we could all look to follow up on as well, right, as an industry.
Yeah, do you feel, I mean, and this could be posed at three of you, right? Do you feel that because there's so much data and so much pressure for accountability and for every dollar to count, that it also requires a different kind of courage and pitching approach to stakeholders to get them to agree to invest in things that are not necessarily immediately trackable, but a longer term, like you say, if you were to do MMM modeling, or if you were to do, say, brand perception shifts, right? Those are not data points that would be able to justify immediate investments, right? So do you find it very difficult or challenging to advise clients in this area when the push is always towards looking at data? Because that's linked to the other question that we're talking about, the signals that you are tracking, right? When it comes to managing in such volatile times. Would any of you want to take this?
I could jump in first. I mean, the response, if I were to give an analogy, right, is that in our busy state of life right now, you always want to still think about planning for your next vacation because everyone deserves a break, right? But if you don't take it, then at some point in time, you're going to end up as well burnout lah. And this is where I feel that, investment on things that you don't see immediate returns for because of the urgency of what's in front of you, at some point it's going to come back to bite you, right? And I would say that the investment on the right resources and infrastructure to get your data silos right in place and organized is probably the most important thing right now that everyone has got to look into, especially if you want to adopt AI. Because AI alone, right, as we get to that topic later as well, will not be able to function if you do not have a clean data environment. And that's super important and critical right now, right? So just going back to the analogy again, I think, it's going to be a bit of a pinch to put that investment forward, but it will pay off in the long run. Just as going on a holiday, right? If you're thinking about it, you'll give you that break as well to last for another 6 months, right? Through pictures and
that analogy. I'm already thinking about my next one. Paul and Debra, is there anything you want to add to this point?
Debra, you go ahead.
Well, I think we also have a challenge of being data fatigued. There's so much data out there. And the decision makers don't want to see all that data. You just need to convince them with one, and that really is sometimes a challenge. And while people say investing in brand, doing a brand study, I think we all just have to bake in our studies, our research into the campaign from the start. That's what we have to do. You track brand performance, whether it's awareness, consideration, and so on. We've done that from the start. So we can see there's a clear correlation between our campaign's launch and the brand going up, right? And these are things, data points, which decision makers just need to know, to be a little bit convinced. When you get trust and buy-in, then hopefully they won't question every last dollar that you're spending. Of course, when times are tough, getting another extra 100,000, 200,000 is difficult. But if you have strategic campaigns that need to, or objectives that need to be achieved, you still need that. You still need to be convinced with relevant data. So yeah, I sometimes find my team drowning in information. I drown in information data as well. Really, and sometimes all the bosses want to know, the CFO wants to know is conversion. Okay, that's always a challenge for all of us. I don't know how you all, how do you convert insurance product? It's a long-term product, blah, blah. It's not really an FMCG good. That's my challenge, right? So you don't always see the conversion, but you see the awareness. Yeah. So again, sometimes that is a challenge.
I think Jacqui might just lean a bit, and I'll be slightly controversial maybe, since I wear a bit more
controversial.
Since I wear at the end of the day, I think if you're managing a small medium business, I believe that you should be closer to your customers. Actually, I think you should trust the fact that because you may not have a large organization to work with it. I mean, I'm not saying that you don't work with big companies. I'm just saying that you probably should be closer to your customers. And in these moments, I think you should really lean into what you really know of your customers even more. But my greatest advice is to then really create a value system that will drive more outcomes for you. Whether it's brand or we create terms so that we are able to sell ideas and justify reasons to exist sometimes. But if you really think of the fundamentals of before data became such a big thing, creativity and some gut instinct and knowing your customers because you talk to them every single day and your intimacy with them, you should know some of the answers already. And I think in these moments, in this uncertain times, the only certainty is you knowing your consumer, whether it comes from data points or whether it comes from the conversation. So you should really talk to your consumers more and talk and talk and talk, and then build your propositions and value system. Rebuild that for the future so that you can be more robust. So and please be brave with your creative messaging. Please be differentiated. Please take some risks, because not doing anything is also bad. Please do something, at least create something that will shift the needle or at least have a talking point, because that really helps. Sorry, Debra, you're
I think this is where we can pivot into the AI story, when you talk about creativity and being differentiated, which is what we all as marketers want to be, right? AI is not going to give you the differentiation and creativity. I mean, they will give you 3 ideas. We are already onboarding tools, right? That's the challenge of AI. And this go-to-market ideation will be much faster, but you need that creative difference and that understanding of your customer to be able to do something that is totally relevant and that will set you apart. And that's what we all want to do as brands. And AI cannot do that, right? It will create you what you give the brief without that extra spark of creativity.
Hey, Jacqui, you're on mute.
Could you hear me now? Yes. Okay. No, I
Yes.
want to say that actually, if you look at to the point about analyzing data and using it to apply to adapting our plans, right? And you're saying about AI as well. Would you say that even if you have all this data at your disposal and you understand what's working and what's not, very often, even if you know or you can draw insights from there or directional guidance on what to do next, how quickly and how responsive can businesses be, and what kind of systems and tools do you rely on to enable this process of responsiveness, right? That ultra responsive mode. How do you actually do this? I mean, and this question can be unpacked in a few ways. One, it's at a campaign level. One is potentially at the business level, where you take advantage of opportunities because you may have observed certain data signals that tells you that there's a burgeoning trend in a space that you might want to build a product for. And also at a multi-market level, and that's probably more for Ian, right? Because you handle multi-market businesses. Like in terms of how you set up, how would you put systems and processes and tools in place to help us be a lot more responsive towards driving towards our objectives, even with all the data signals and everything that we are now looking at?
Yeah. I would probably start off first speaking again as an agency practitioner, where we work with clients from very diverse sectors, right? Pharma, healthcare, to telco, to financial services, to government. And I guess the first thing that I've always encouraged my leaders is, and leaders and teams, in fact, it's not really a tool. It's more about the fact that we all have to take very keen interest about what's happening around us, right? So rather than spending a few hours doom scrolling, really tune into Channel News Asia, right? Or just really read
Oh,
a
I
couple
love this
of
ad.
yeah,
Thank you.
but I think that's been extremely helpful as well, in terms of how we're just really gaining, insight to what's going on in the world and how there are some implications then that will hit our clients. Even for myself, when I meet up with, CMOs again, right? At least I know what's at the back of their minds or their bosses' minds, to then be able to empathize. So I think that's the starting point, right, for everything. And then if I move down into closer to execution, right? I think simply because we also build a lot of dashboards for our clients, and I guess clients would also be expecting us to report on campaigns, right? It's not just about dashboards for the marketing investments that we have, but also if we can try to integrate, for example, client performance data, sales data, for example, into those dashboards. I think that would also be something that our team should be referring to. And again, right, that's where we can own that conversation to see again where there are gaps that we could fill, where there could be optimization opportunities. And then I would say what's probably more important, and probably Paul, you can step in as well after me to talk about this, right? But I think from a communication perspective and messaging perspective, increasingly there are a lot more new generational subcultures, cultures and subcultures, right, that are surfacing, and one thing could be trendy, for today, and something else could be for tomorrow. Obviously, you don't have to jump into every single one of them, but it'll be good to start to monitor and observe as well, right? Like what's really going on, because we are all in our own respective echo chambers. And sometimes your consumers as well, or your new emerging consumers, could be thinking about your product in a very different dimension if you don't. So it's very closely related to what Paul said, right? Engage your consumers. In this case, you can use social listening tools, media monitoring tools, look at search intent data, right? To just determine again, right, what are some of these angles, right, that you could help to adjust your messaging strategy.
I enjoy this, Ian, because we're calling out each other so that Jacqui don't have to arrow. And thanks for that. Maybe I give a real example. And it's about 6 months ago. So look, using, and this for Indonesia, but I think can apply to Singapore. Using social listening, we were trying to figure out whether we can find new segments to go for or not, because it's a brand called Lifebuoy, body wash, right? I mean, nobody really thinks about all these things so much. But then how do we try to find new audience in a time whereby it's slightly more turbulent, and especially when individuals don't quite care, and we typically will target moms for the families. Through social listening, of course, we know that in Jakarta itself, there's a growing trend of people not having families not having more children, but instead they have more pets. So we would never market to a household of 2 and say, hey, here's Lifebuoy and protect your family. But because they're fur parents, then the shift immediately went into a campaign. They say, okay, we will use the same product, change the proposition, shift the messaging, and say, if you love your pet, you should love yourself, therefore you keep clean, right? You're going to work the whole day and all that. So it is an interesting shift, and we also see uplifts in different audiences. And I think that this is the right moment, and to even Debra's and Ian's point, when you know your consumers, your product that well, data works in the way that it should drive value, not in the way to just to have a conversation around it just because you have it. But the outcome is, where can I find new audience? And can I shift my product into a proposition? Because the 4 Ps applies even more critically during a time where you have lesser money to spend. But that's a real example, and it works. So again, I think Singapore, we could try more of that, seeking new audience and looking at how product extension would work, and pricing at the same time, as Ian mentioned.
Is it
I don't know, Debra, you could...
yeah, she looks like she has something to add to your point.
Well, thank you all for calling out the brand I do for 20 years, yeah? No, I feel it is very important. I agree totally with Ian, and we need more people in the industry to show that they are aware of what's going on in the world, right? Context is important, I always say. You need to understand global big issues and trends. Then you need to understand things which are trending. Be on the pulse, correct. And now, as Ian says, there are more and more tribes, right? With social media, everybody has an interest group, and we are responsible, we're targeting very specifically, right? So it is definitely harder to be, it is easier and also harder to market, because you want to market and hit a specific audience group, but as Paul says, thinking bigger and getting new audience, how do you get other people to like what you're doing, right? And to buy your product requires a bigger lens. So it is challenging, but I think people in marketing and media really are people who are supposed to be on trend anyway, right? But and this is very important, right? And using data in a different way, I mean, thinking creatively and differently, how you get, as Paul's example, is very important. And I don't know where the origin of the question was, whether it was about how we need to adapt. How do we manage the workforce to work for us? Because context is different, as we spoke earlier before we started the call. I mean, we have many more young people in the agency, many more young people in our teams right now, millennials and Gen Zs, right? And they are very trendy, but sometimes they don't think about the bigger picture, right? How do we get that? How do we get them on board with them to understand that these things are important when you want to win a pitch? You're not just creating that content, we're giving you the opportunity to present to the CEO of another company, because that's what you expect today. So please have that have that information and data, have that presence, right? I don't know how you all do it, but yeah, how do you train young people to think that way?
Do you think that also now with the whole emphasis on being responsive, being very precise, leveraging on data and analytics, right? And everything else, even AI. Do you feel that it's more challenging to define the value of creativity and what it means to be creative as well? Because that is it's a big question, but I think very often when we try to chase down targets, or we try to look at driving quick results, right? And we are all about using tools. We are all about scale. All these words are like the buzzwords of every organization. I think for all four of us, there's no difference, right? Everyone will hear it at some point in time in meetings, in our own internal management reviews. Like, what do you think is the value of creativity now, and where would it play best in a volatile and challenging environment where we need to be quicker and sharper and more effective? Maybe, I don't, any one of you want to take this? Paul, Ian?
I could start.
Sure, Ian.
Yeah, I think creativity is still really at the heart of everything that we do in marketing.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, what you want to drive is resonance, right? You need to cut through clutter, and there's no other way but to be creative as well about your messaging and what you stand for, right? And of course, then getting people just to, of course, not just entertain them, but feel that they are connected then with an idea that you're trying to present to their lives, right? Or based on the value proposition that your product is looking to offer. So I think it is harder simply because, media is a lot more fragmented today. Everyone is so distracted again with many things going on in our lives. But there's still absolutely value in being creative. And whether or not it's again, I would say it's not just the agency's job. I think everyone can be creative, but at the same time as well, it's not. It can't be overly democratized as well. I think there still has to be custodianship. And that's where, again, right, creative agency leaders, working hand in hand, for example, with marketing leaders to align on that custodianship for creativity, can then set the core to then start to be distributed into the more democratized aspect of how creative you can be, for example, working with creators or influencers, and then getting them to be creative in their own light based on what you have defined, right? So yeah, that's my take on it.
Actually, building your point about custodianship of creativity, I think is a very good point, because I find even now with a lot of advertisers, due to pressures to go to market quickly and to activate campaigns very quickly and with very tactical objectives, there's a tendency to also sometimes go even straight to publishers or creators directly, right? And sometimes not even collaborating that closely with agency partners. And I've been to both sides of the ecosystem, fully understanding the dynamics, right? So when that happens, who remains the creative custodian? Is it still important to have that custodianship? Will it be the client then taking on that role, because they have actually removed that layer of experienced hand from a third-party help, an expert help, right, to oversee that all elements actually stack up to a bigger whole picture? So that is a question I think probably, I see Paul smiling, so I'm going to direct that question to him.
I see Debra smiling. Since you asked, I mean, for me, I think that's, back to my first point, I think that's where the strength of the relationship, the agency with client is built. Who can help when is important. But for my experience so far, over the years, working with brands like Unilever and all that, right? They try, most brands would try, but ultimately at some point, the agency will still come back to assist and help to ensure that at least the narrative is consistent and built in a way that the use of KOLs and influencers are really, there's an opportunity to amplify whatever we're trying to say. Because I think that's some guidance and guardianship is still required. Of course, clients can manage that, but I think clients now have to also deal with the bosses a lot more, and like Debra said, got to become chief experience officer plus don't know what.
Time roles.
Yeah. So that's what I'm observing still currently.
What do you think, Debra?
Okay, I think my experience is a little bit unique and different because I have come from content, as you all know, and own platforms, understand. So it's a little bit different. I can build my little own thing here, and I can say that I I drive the direction and so on. Of course, collaboratively with whoever we work with, right? And getting insights from the ground and from younger colleagues. But I'm guilty of what you say, lah. I mean, sorry, we commission our own content and go out, right? And we work directly you guys as well, right? I don't think everybody can do it, really. And I think that is why there will always be opportunities I feel, right? Bigger brands might say you want to create our own thing, but how? Are they really going to hire an entire agency to become an in-house team? They aren't. They can't. Maybe they can in the future, I don't know, but they might not have the expertise to do it unless they hire one of you to go and set it up for them, right? And I don't think we quite see that trend yet. I do see in-housing a lot more, right? For certain specific functions, but maybe not everybody will be bold enough to set up their own content creation team, right? They might do it for smaller things, social media posts, but not really creating videos, or maybe they do smaller videos, but not the whole shop, right? So creativity is still ultimately the most important thing. I agree, Ian. The second thing today, very tied to that, is authenticity, right? How do you authentically speak to your customer with your brand? How do you create authenticity, right? And it is a combination of understanding what's on the ground, listening, as you say, social listening, and having more people give you feedback. Professionals who are close to the ground give you feedback is important so that you can understand authentic conversations and how to ensure that your brand remains authentic. So I think that is something that, again, AI cannot quite replicate yet, right? How do you authentically speak? How do you speak an authentic voice, authentic Singaporean voice to a Singaporean customer? To a customer in Bangkok, in Thailand, right? There is still that localization element. There are still contextual elements that really, I think any AI tool cannot quite get there yet. Because it's all about human connection, your human daily conversations, which are not necessarily captured. You can't say, oh, speak like an authentic. Maybe you can key that in, but having said that, maybe they're all listening to our conversations right now on phone, right? But I think it will take a while. And this is where we come in as content creators, as marketers, where we have that voice to be able to not only convince the public, convince your consumers, but also to convince people in the boardroom that you need to listen, and you need to listen to people who actually have an expert view to help you craft the messaging and the story and the video content, whatever content on TikTok, whatever, for your customers. So it does take C-suite people to understand the importance of the function. And I think in today's context, more and more people see it because of the growth of media, social media. So it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity.
So building on this, I was thinking that, when we speak about clients or marketers that are also doing some parts of in-housing, for example, and some parts of relying on experts, right, to help them with key tasks, like whether it's about building authenticity of the brand or knowing whether you have the chops to be the creative custodian or, how much of it should you outsource and in-house. With the constant pressure to go to market very quickly and to react in a very responsive manner to drive numbers, what would you say that it's important for clients to also take a very honest view of their own internal capabilities, when it comes to their own resources, their own setup, their own background as well, right? To your point, Debra, because of your background, having been to different parts of the marketing ecosystem, there could be a lot more opportunity for you to then oversee, the various spectrum of marketing requirements, right? To drive towards your end goals. But not every brand is possibly, helmed necessarily by people with that varied background, right? Or the experience. So, it'll be interesting to also hear from agency standpoint, Ian and Paul, like what would be your advice to clients if someone came to you to ask about, whether they should consider doing parts of their services in-house or parts of the things in-house so that they can go to market more quickly. Because in a lot of conversations that I have with clients today, many of them who do have parts of the businesses in-house is because they want to be faster. They think it gives them a lot better control. Even though agency partners typically have, probably invest in bigger tools, global tools, global data, and all the AI technology, for example. So what would you say to that? And how would you advise them to navigate, if such conversations do pop up in the boardroom?
So I could start with this, right? And I would say that in multiple conversations with local and international clients, there is no right or wrong answer as long as you're very aware about where your trade-offs are going to be, right? And the example again, for example, if we take in-housing as an example, right? There is truth then that there can be a lot more direct connection than with the team, the agency in-house team, to go faster to market, right? With how, for example, you're connected to the marketing and the board conversations as well that are going on. But where you will find the trade-off in the longer term, and being an agency proponent for over 2 decades right now as well, or rather an employee for 2 decades, I would say that you will often then have a different problem to deal with, because you're going to have churn at some point with your own internal staff, especially those fulfilling the agency role, because most of the people who thrive within agencies actually enjoy diverse experiences, working on different clients, different sectors, working on very different briefs, and having that permission to challenge, right, the marketing organization from time to time, right? Of course, if we do have a different point of view about how to go to market, rather than, oh, this person is my boss, so I've got to keep saying yes, right? So I think there has to be a introspection is always a very important thing. As per individuals as well, I think we always have to reflect. And maybe a point that Paul had mentioned earlier, right? I think the trust with your agency partner or the value of your networks is going to be very key. Because I think if you have the receptivity to listen, right, and to get a download or get some honest feedback, then you would know perhaps what levers you actually do need to pull, right, at that circumstances that you're trying to deal with in your organization.
Yeah, I love the point about not falling into the trap of having an internal echo chamber, right? Because you're right. I mean, as much as agencies are paid by clients, but I think having that objective view and that expert view is always helpful to bring some order and logic back into the discussions. And it also helps clients to balance the dynamics in a room, right? When you have very strong voices in a meeting of multiple stakeholders having a different point of view.
Actually, sorry, I just have one quick build to this, right? Before maybe Paul, you can go, because it relates then to someone's question, right? In the chat itself about how can we make marketing and sales teams work more closely together, right? And I think I probably have the permission to say this as an agency practitioner that very, very often we see the politics between sales and marketing in organizations, right? Because budgets, again, are bifurcated in some organizations. Everyone's fighting for the budget and the right of control. And I would just probably quote our Prime Minister, right, in the latest SG rally as well. His focus was a lot about the we and not the me.
Yes.
And this is very often where, of course, the agency does play a role to come in again to say that, hey, you guys are not talking to one another. You guys are trying to create different goals and KPIs that are contradictory. Let's go into the room together again, right? And let's figure out how can we all succeed, right? By streamlining and trying to identify again the roles that we play and the value that we can look to contribute. So I think again, this is a form of how necessary introspection as well, right? Could probably serve by getting honest feedback, from a partner.
Wonderful. Yeah, Paul, you wanted to say something just now?
No, I think I echo Ian's points. I don't have any other bills to that, except for, I think as we speak about marketing and sales, the respect of each role, where we talk about brand versus conversion, I think is exactly the things that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. Understanding that awareness and resonance drives easier sale. And understanding that the sales conversion is important to marketing if that's released to them to also understand whether it's working or not. And I think that's exactly the point. And yes, we experience a lot of the disconnect between marketing and sales, and then don't even talk about technology yet, because then you want to layer all your data together and all that, right? So that's some challenges that we face as an agency partner. But you have the ability now to reconfigure your operations because times are not so great. Then this is the best opportunity to align and come together and say, okay, guys, let's solve this problem today.
Yes, actually, now in the interest of time, I'm going to take one question that also just came in from the audience. I thought this is a really interesting one because we know we focus a lot on creative control, creative custodianship, and how much control we need to let go a little bit of, right? As well as also making sure that everything that we do across all touch points stack up to a greater whole. And also to Debra's point about authenticity. So there was this question that was posed by a member of the audience about how much should brands hand over to influencers and KOLs in terms of, creativity, right? Versus controlling what they do or say or create or broadcast, right? In order to have a unified brand voice without still stifling their authenticity. Because, every creator, every KOL has their own style, their own way of doing things, their own way of communicating with their fans, right? And their followers. So they will want to do things in their own way. But how do we ensure that, how much control should we maintain and how much should we let go of in order to achieve the results without compromising their authenticity nor the brand's authenticity and consistency?
Yeah.
Who would like?
Can I jump in there?
Oh, Debra, please.
If you're gonna use, if as a brand you're gonna use an influencer, first of all, you use an influencer which is aligned with your brand. Otherwise, you don't use that person, right? Secondly, if you want to control what an influencer does, or how they present themselves, it's impossible. Don't use that influencer as well, right? What you can do is give the influencer a brief on the content you want, because that's your brand. But if you're going to interfere with how they present themselves, be themselves, or their brand, then don't use that influencer. It's not going to work, right? The other thing about using KOLs, which I try to provide guidance to my team, is that you use people that you are connected with and try to use them for the long term, right? Don't just use them for a one-off campaign. You can experiment and try, but people know that you paid that influencer to say these good things about you. So that also, the audience is not stupid. Customers are not stupid. They know, right? That you paid this person to sell this product, right? That's already at the back of mind. In fact, that is for any influencer today. So there's no point trying to control. If it doesn't fit with you, just don't use that person.
The other thing, Jacqui, we keep telling our clients is that if we hire the KOLs and influencers for who they are and not to change them, because as human beings also, we shouldn't be changing anybody. And to Debra's point, we should invest time to build that relationship with the KOLs that we believe that carries the same values and will tell the stories that we want. It's not a question of can we change them. It's a question of accepting them and then do they fit the brand values or not, and invest in them.
So the point is really not about control, but it's more about curation, right? So like from the start, when you actually select them into the to be part of your marketing campaign or to be an ambassador of sorts, right? There has to already be very good guidelines and curation process where you're already comfortable with the way they're doing things and how they're doing things. And the kind of audiences that they're speaking to before you even shortlist them, right? That's I think that would be the direction how we are going. And yeah. Sorry, Ian, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think it's a very important point and question to address, right? Because I think all around the world and even in our region, influencer marketing dollars are significantly on an increase. And this is what we have noted again between both domestic and international clients, right? And in Singapore and Southeast Asia and beyond. I think if you are to call out, what the Unilever, all the world's largest advertisers, right, in the world, CEO Fernando Fernandez had said as well, there's an intent of shifting 50% of their dollars, right, towards social and creator first marketing. It's important that every organization learns to get this right, but it's also quite tricky in some way because where we are observing the landscape for influencers to be at this point in time is that there's a lot of fragmentation, right? There are far too many players, for example, in the ecosystem, far too many agents and far too many individuals as well plying their trade in this front. And pricing also is one thing to control, right? Because prices are very dynamic. And the lifespan of an influencer is not like, for example, a particular channel or particular publication, right? Where it stands for something over years, right? Someone could be a hip hop dancer today and become a mom tomorrow. So what they stand for as well is going to be something that needs to be observed. So going back to that point again, curation is going to be very critical, especially as we start to scale up. And what we are noticing, right, is that especially in the larger economies that we are inspired by and it will take shape in this part of the world, right? We are seeing that where the creator engagements are today are quite similar to where the publishing ecosystem was maybe about 12, 13 years ago. It's starting to move to a space where it's becoming more and more programmatic, right? Because you need to manage it in scale. But at the same time as well, when I say programmatic, don't just think about media, right? Even the way you issue briefs as well to your curated creators is going to be something to think about. So it's always that going back again to somebody, whether or not it's within marketing or within an agency, to serve that custodianship first of what the brand voice stands for. What then the brand wants to commission to produce, to say, is something then that you own as an asset directly, right? But on the other end of the spectrum, where you want to then start engaging creators, you got to have some flexibility or a lot of flexibility for them to then exercise their own voice and their own style, right? But it all still, it still ladders up to the core.
Right. Thank you for all the useful insights, right? I think that's very, very good perspectives that we're hearing from the three of you. I think one final question before we end our webinar today would be, what kind of, I would say, advice would you give to our listeners today, when it comes to what would be the few things that you want them to take away when it comes to navigating, all these market changes and volatility, and also the impact of AI on, the various parts of the businesses that you are handling right now? What would be that parting shot that you would tell everyone? Maybe start with Debra.
Okay, we talked about AI earlier. Adapting and, well, first of all, not being afraid of new technology and AI, right? Getting on board, finding out what's there in the market. I think this last year and this year, there's been quite a big shift. Last year, we're still developing tools. The market is still developing tools. This year, I've seen commercialization. Everybody's coming to you with their solution. It might not be fully thought out, but we've onboarded a couple. And your team needs to experiment and learn, right? Use the tools, don't be afraid of them. And then we still need to develop all the guardrails in place, right? So adaptability is very important. Resilience is important because of is volatile out there, right? Being able to adapt quickly, being resilient in terms of being very clear with your brand voice and your objectives and your customer, right? Being resilient in the sense that not shifting just because things around you are shifting. At the core, you must be very clear what your values stand for and who your customer is, right? That's very important. And just then being able to experiment, not be afraid to try. That is what I would say I would advise anybody today who is in marketing, right? And go with the flow in a way, but at the same time, adapt, learn quickly.
What about Paul?
For me, I suppose AI definitely has to be part and parcel of the entire conversation from a business perspective, but when it comes right down to brand and marketing itself, just know that if you don't set your tools up properly, especially addressing the fundamentals of what makes your brand truly distinctive, spending time and effort to really craft your brand tone, voice, and style, that's truly important. Because part of that training data that you put into any Gen AI tool has to be built on that, vis-a-vis the competition and your consumers and all that. All that hard work of the 5 Cs or 4 Cs needs to be done so that it feeds the training data to your Gen AI tools, whatever you use, so that you do not lose any point of distinctiveness and you're creating values back to your customer at every touch point as you try to dominate the media landscape in however much money you have. Last point is please always keep the human in the loop. Make sure that there's always somebody there watching and guarding and training and all that, and not just leave it to do what it needs to do.
Leave it to run a life of its own.
Yes.
Yes, and finally from Ian.
I think it's I would double down on the points, right? There is this yin and yang complementary view of technology, right, in service of the work that we do as humans. And I think over the recent months, there are days where I feel overwhelmingly excited about what the age of AI brings. But I must admit there are also days where I feel a little bit scared, because, you know, it's progressing so fast. But I've learned to accept and also encourage leaders to feel that it's okay to feel both, right? A little bit bipolar sometimes, excited to drive, but also it's also okay to feel anxious. But at the end of the day, again, I think this is what fuels us then to ensure that we are addressing both planes, right? And again, one of it, like we spoke about earlier, is making sure again that you are still investing towards the future, right? And thinking again about, you know, establishing how to capture your hard data points and organize them as well to then work better in the age of AI. But echoing again what we had discussed, I think that human connection, right? Staying close to your customers, staying close to your colleagues, your staff, staying close to everyone around you and having these conversations, real genuine conversations, is also going to be really critical and key. So I think that's my parting shot, and we all have to figure out how, you know, to balance our time, right, to address this need. And we
Yeah,
will.
I share the same views, right? I feel excited as well as scared at times by all the difference, you know, like all the new technology that's coming up, right? And AI and all. But I think as part of our work and various, regardless of whether we're from the publisher side, the client side, or the agency side, I think embracing it is a must, right? We have to already get ourselves you know, familiar and use it to scale our businesses in areas that make sense. I think the guidepost will always be adopting it within the realms of ethical guidance, right? And that is always also a difficult one because it's a new area. So there's always that question about how do you do it responsibly? How do we ensure that the impact of AI is a positive one and we act responsibly as not just as marketers or as agency partners, but also as employers, right? In terms of what this means for our people and our talent. So I think we're running out of time today, but I wanted to really thank the three of you, Paul, Debra, Ian, for this amazing sharing session today. There's so much firsthand experience that have gone into the rich content that we have discussed, and you've been so generous in sharing, you know, all your insights and all the examples. I'm certain everyone today here probably would leave Executive Insights feeling very nourished, encouraged, a little scared, but also very excited and hopefully clearer about how they could navigate all the changes and the volatility in these uncertain times. So to end today, I think we would like to thank the three of you, and we would also see everyone again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.